Welcome to Women Talking About AI, where we spotlight the remarkable individuals shaping the future of technology and education. In this episode, hosts Jessica and Kimberly welcome Amanda Bickerstaff, founder and CEO of AI for Education. Amanda is on a mission to empower 1 million educators with essential AI literacy skills. The conversation explores the tensions between EdTech promises and realities, the critical importance of AI literacy in education, and how generative AI is fundamentally challenging educational structures. Amanda offers candid perspectives on the current limitations of AI tools, effective prompting techniques, and why both AI resistance and blind optimism miss the mark. This episode delivers thought-provoking perspectives on changing learning in the age of artificial intelligence. Welcome, everyone. Today on Women Talking About AI, we're excited to welcome an extraordinary voice shaping the future of education, Amanda Bickerstaff, founder and CEO of AI for Education. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, glad to be here with you all. In fake spring, whenever you're listening to this, I live in New York City and it was fake spring before I left and now it's freezing in April. So I hope it is nicer where you all are.
I'm also, I'm on the East Coast and we just got a cold snap as well. So it's like, oh, it was nice while it lasted.
I live in Iowa, so there's no such thing as, until June, it's just cold. So, yeah, I did not know you were in New York. I don't know. I thought you were in Arizona. I don't know why.
I was in Phoenix last week. So if you don't know my trajectory, like I started AI for Education. I lived in Australia for 3 years right before this, and then I traveled for 6 months. And then I started AI for Education, and I'm like, okay, had never done business travel. And now just in the last week, I was in Phoenix, San Diego, Cape Cod, and then back here. And we also worked with the school district in Nebraska, Canada. We were in New York City. So it's been kind of funny, but I have been to Iowa 6 times since I started AI for Education. Iowa is one of our best, Iowa, the school SAI, the Leadership Association. Dana Schoen was one of the first people that ever brought us out. I think she might have been the first person to buy a full day from us in person. And so, in fact, Corey and my team going to Ankeny in Iowa in a couple of weeks.
That's right south of me. Yeah. Did you say Ankeny? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes. And have you been to Nevada, Iowa?
I have not, but is it spelled like Nevada? Just to make it very
It sure
confusing.
is.
Love it.
It sure is.
I wonder how many people accidentally find themselves at the airport thinking they're going to.
Right.
Well, no, there's no airport in Nevada. So, no, don't worry.
We're safe.
You're safe. Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from teaching to what you do now. I know it was like teaching to EdTech and now to your leadership role at AI for EDU. Because I feel like there's a lot of teachers right now who are wanting to get into other things and maybe thinking about it. And so, yeah, just tell us about that journey.
Sure. Yeah. I started as a teacher and so I taught high school biology and the Bronx in New York City. I joke that I was a baby teacher. I was not a very good baby teacher. I was really green. I was an alternative route certification teacher. I have an autoimmune disease. I don't know if everyone knows, but I started, so I have arthritis pretty significantly since I was 20. And so when I went into my interview at the end of my senior year, I actually told the interviewers that I would only be able to do 3 years because I knew that the strain of teaching in such a complex environment was going to be a lot. So it's actually quite funny because I think that while those were the most formative years I've ever had, it was much shorter than I think I would have done otherwise. But I do actually think that what it allowed me to do is that I had to think pretty quickly about if I wasn't going to stay in the classroom, where could I have impact? And so for me, that has always been the driving force. Actually, why I became a teacher. So my arthritis that I was diagnosed with, I had always wanted to be a doctor. Always. I wanted to be a doctor. I even thought about being doing an MD, PhD in anthropology and also in medicine so that I could do public health internationally. And then I hit this wall where I couldn't walk. I couldn't if you know me at all, I cannot sit still, and I would have to sit in classes just staring because I couldn't take notes and I couldn't type because my hands were so bad. So that really very quickly made it clear that I couldn't be a doctor. So I had to figure out where I could have that same impact very quickly, because the reason I wanted to be a doctor was to help people. And so I became a teacher, and then again, I could only do it for a short period of time. So when I moved out of the classroom, I started I kept working in the Bronx, which was great. Shout out the Bronx Institute, who were my first job after teaching, who had brought AI for education in twice. So we worked with who I was at that time, as their program associates, we've actually worked with twice already, which is pretty cool. And started doing that. And then I was like, okay, so I don't know. I always kind of felt like I was a little outside the world a bit, where I was this like kind of strange, person that kind of saw the world differently. And so I was like, well, if I get a PhD, then I could potentially be a professor, and I can also start to like have a little bit more gravitas when I looked like I was like, 20 years old. And so I did that. And I'd say, everybody, if you're going to get a PhD, make sure you want a PhD. I thought I needed one, but I didn't know anybody that ever gone through a PhD program. I grew up in a really small town. There was no one around me, no one in my family. This is where cultural capital comes in place. And so I think I thought I was doing it for the right reasons, but I wasn't. So it ended up being that I started working a lot. So I worked 80-hour weeks while getting a full-time PhD. And so in New York City, do not do that, everybody. Just don't. There's going to be a lot of moments in this conversation where you're like, don't do what Amanda says, because do what Amanda did. So I did that, and it was like so interesting, because while I did enjoy some of the school component, I didn't like academic writing. I really liked working. And so after I did this for 4 years, everybody, again, do not do what I did. And then started working in EdTech, and really like started at the ground floor. Like I didn't really it was like an assistant manager job where I actually had more experience, I think, than the person that was my boss. And so, but it really allowed me, because of all the experience I had and being that kind of bit of an outlier, to move very quickly. So I was a CEO in like 7 years after I left my graduate program. And that was in Australia. So I was the CEO of an education technology company in Australia that worked with about 700 schools. So not a small thing. And so that transition, though, was really interesting for me. And if you're thinking about making your own transition, I think you just have to really like lean into what makes you you, but also like kind of have to compromise. Like I like took this role as an assistant manager, and it was my foot in the door. And that year and a half gave me enough to actually get that next job where I was like really like building a company, even back then. So that would be my suggestion. But again, I am like, if I have a TED talk ever, it's going to be do it the hardest possible way. That's going to be my TED talk. And so don't do that if you don't have to. But for me, it has been really formative. And I think that's why I've been able to even build AI for education.
That is such a fascinating story, especially thinking about the transition from, I know that there was a lot in between, but going from like biology teacher to ed tech. Kimberly and I are also new to ed tech. I'm curious to know, like, was there some sort of event? What sparked that interest into transitioning to ed tech? Or was it just an opportunity that you thought was interesting?
Well, okay. First of all, I have always really thought learning management systems are just not good. So if you run a learning management system, I'm sorry, but like I have always been ultimately frustrated by that. So my first job before I started my PhD program, my second job after starting my PhD program, right before I did, was at the small company in Rye, New York, that had like worked with NASA, NSF, and NOAA, and they had what used to call Scholar 360, and it was like one of the first experiences I had with online learning. And because I'm old enough that like it wasn't really a big part of my undergrad, definitely a big part of my graduate degrees, and I was just always so frustrated with learning management systems like this. We had this huge like opportunity with education technology, and then it just didn't work. And I think like the last 20 years are an example of like a lot of the education technology that we have, has it really genuinely made instruction better, easier? Has it really made personalization learning possible? Has it really, or has it caused a reframing of education into more administrative work and constant learning of new tools and that are not always very good? So I think that was a part of why when I left my PhD program, because during the PhD program, I worked for like Arthur Levine, creating a STEM program at MIT. I went into New York housing authorities and evaluated after school programs. I was in, I did this like really crazy amount of work, content and curriculum development. Like it was all these kind of different pieces. But I think when I left, it was like, how do I start to think about what really is going to have the most impact? And so that first job I had, that anchor job after my PhD program, had a component of both, the people side of things, but also the ed tech side of things. And so that was, I think, my entree. But then realistically, until I ran Pivot in Australia, I had not really been in a true education technology company where we had proprietary technology that I was in charge of, right? And all of those frustrations that I'd have as not someone fully aligned with it, I now know why. And so there is a reason why AI for education is we're not building technology. There are two reasons. One is I do not think at this stage that outside of the foundation models that much is defensible. The second is I don't like building technology for school. Guys, if you're listening, you're a teacher or a leader or higher education, you're like building tech for schools is the hardest thing I've ever done in terms of trying to figure out how to work. And so that's just really why I have been in ed tech and it's really informed me, but like we are tech agnostic for very good reasons right now. And I always joke with my friends that are building Gen AI ed tech and I'm like, I was like, I am really happy. You might have all the growth in the world, but we're excited to just be able to like do our work and never have to worry about sign-ons or like bandwidth or, just the flexibility of like how many concurrent sessions, none of that, none of it. It's great.
I'm laughing.
Oh, good.
I'm laughing because, yeah.
I mean, I felt, I always joke, I'm like, you might have a $25 million round, but I get to sleep at night knowing that everything is done. And I also have the locus of control when things are broken in my little teeny company. It's growing though, that we can fix it. And that is so nice.
Yeah. That's what you and I talked about last time, is having that control, because if you have responsibility for something, you need to have control or it feels very, it's a terrible feeling to be responsible for something, but not to have any control.
Not be able to fix it. And I think that's where, I mean, I do think that potentially with everything happening with vibe coding, if you've never heard of vibe coding, that's where, you let the generative AI system like kind of lead you places that maybe that'll help going forward. But like, yeah, I mean, I guess I also like, for me, I'd bootstrap the business. Like essentially I didn't work for almost 9 months. So I traveled the world and then didn't have a job. And then I bootstrapped the business. We didn't get paid until July of last year. And so, that's almost 2 years of no salary. And thank goodness I was locked in Australia and never did anything with my salary when I was there because of COVID. But it is, that need to like really have, like, know that what we're doing is sustainable for this core group. It actually meant that we were more conservative. We probably should have paid ourselves earlier because of tax issues that came up later. But I do think it really like helped me feel confident that like if we hired someone, we would be able to sustain that role. And that is something that I think has been very helpful because people are the most important thing, right? Whether it's people we impact on the outside or the people that we impact in our own community, in our own culture. And so that's just been really nice. And if you're doing ed tech like you all are, I wish you all the happiness and the lack of bugs and all of those things. But I'm very happy with AI for education over here right now.
I get it.
Yeah. Just this morning, I woke up to messages about issues with our servers. And, I can't fix it. We rely on our technical team. And I have 2 consulting practices where I have full control over everything. I know how to fix any problem at any time. And that has been a true test of my patience and that need for control. But I think going back to this idea of just ed tech in general, I'm curious to know, especially since your experience in Australia, something that surprised Kimberly and I when we moved into this space, we were not previously aware of the tension between academics and ed tech companies. And we have users in Australia, and those are some of our biggest fans and cheerleaders. And I'm curious to know if that was a surprise to you, if you also experienced that tension, if it was different in Australia.
I mean, I think it goes to my earlier point. I think the promise of ed tech has never been realized, and it doesn't matter if you're in Australia, UK, global South, like it just hasn't happened. I think that also, there is such a proliferation of tools out there, and so many of them are doing shades of the same thing that it can be quite hard for decision makers to make good decisions, and also to be able to even accurately evaluate how good something is. I think that education technology, we don't have metrics of success very often, and I'm pleased to see that we're moving more to outcomes based funding. That is going to be positive, but it was always one of those things where it was like, oh, like, but what really makes a kid succeed? We're only one small part, so how could we do that? And I think that that's been a very difficult straw man argument of like, oh, but it's not us, it's this, or correlation versus causation. But like, I was talking again to Gen AI ed tech leaders over the AI show this weekend, and I was like, be open to like talking about what's not working or your big questions. Like, I think that it would be a breath of fresh air to actually understand that no one has a chatbot nailed, that no one has a tool generator nailed. No one does, because the tools themselves are at max. The entire infrastructure is less than a decade old. And that generative AI in the format that we have today is less than 3. And so I think that, that's a tension. Also, like, it is so hard to have change management. I mean, that's why people are willing to spend go into 5 to 10-year contracts for a technology that's not that good. And so I think that that's where it gets really difficult. And also what we see is that the incentives of venture capital and or these roll-ups from mergers and acquisitions that happen are not really aligned with how schools work and what the impact is meant to be. So I think it's earned, Jessica. I don't think that this is something that like, and I think for us, like when everything went down, like if you have really good customer service and you're trying to fix things and you're super responsive, teachers and leaders will follow you to the ends of the earth and give you their patience because they don't get it other places. They're just ones, especially if you're like a district or a school of like 500 students or 1,000 students, you're not the big fish, right? And so I think that like it is earned. And I was talking to a colleague that runs quite a large, just education piece. And she was talking about how, education and technology are it's a misnomer. It should be education with a technology component, not its own field, because what ends up happening is you have an educator side and a technology side, and often they don't talk to each other, or there are technologists that come in and see 3 million teachers and this many students, and this is the best thing possible, and they think they can fix it with no experience at all. There are Gen AI ed tech tools out right now that have clients that have no education people on their teams. And so I think that this is where I hope this is a galvanizing moment where there's less money to be invested. There's going to be more competition. There's going to be more opportunity for educators that are not technical to do the work that is possible with vibe coding again and other pieces to have a better system. But I just don't think it's been a very good experience for educators or leaders over the last 20, 25 years of this proliferation of tools.
Yeah, and I think we could all probably agree that the system that we've had in place at the higher ed level and the K through 12 level is clearly not working. Look at the outcomes. The more the same with great technology isn't going to suddenly fix all of those systemic issues. In terms of the work you're doing now, I'm curious to know if there's something that stands out in terms of what surprises you, maybe in terms of misconceptions or where people really get it right. Because you do a lot of work in the K through 12 space. I know that you do some work in higher ed, but we're mostly in higher ed and at the very tail end of higher ed, like graduate education. So we don't do really anything in the K through 12 space. I'm curious to know what that experience has been like, and if there's been anything that's really surprising to you that maybe you wouldn't have thought would be true with this technology.
I mean, I think that it is so much smoke and mirrors. Like generative AI is still smoke and mirrors in a couple ways. And one is it still fails all the time. And you hear all this big news about artificial general intelligence being 2 to 5 years away, and Gemini 2.5 and OpenAI, reasoning. I watched OpenAI do a 10-minute demo where they threw 40 minutes of compute at this demo in front of 100 plus, higher ed and K-12 people. And the final product had an enormous hallucination in it. And unlucky for them that I know a lot about science teaching. So I picked it up immediately. But I think that it's just not that good yet, everybody. It is just not that good yet. And no one, if you are using a tool and it does not mention hallucinations, which are these inaccuracies, bias, knowledge cutoffs, then you are doing, it's a disservice that's being done, but also you need to ask better questions too, or at least know that it's not going to work. But then I think that what is also smoke and mirrors is that people and the way that these tools are marketed, especially the generative AI chatbots by the foundation makers, model makers like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they make it seem like you just ask a question, a very simple question. Like if you look at their prompts on the screen, they're like, write a recipe. That is not how you prompt. Prompting, while it is natural language, meaning it is how you type and speak, is technical. It has rules. We don't understand all of them, but flooding the context window with content and specificity and giving feedback and having it be conversational and not just keywords is enormous. And so what we see is that so much of this could be improved based on how the bot makers, their UX, UI, their user experience and user interfaces are terrible. I've been screaming this into the void to them as well for almost 2 years. And so, but I think it's this false sense of security that if I just do it, but then what happens is the method, what you get back, the actual outputs are not good. Generic in, generic out, biased in, biased out, crappy in, crappy out, lack of specificity in, lack of specificity out. And so I think that this is where it is something that the AI literacy component is so important. I know a later question you had about that, so I'm just going to jump into it. For us, we balance AI literacy. We believe it's a foundational literacy similar to digital and media literacy. So an output or outpost of information literacy. And so I do think that for us, it means knowing the difference between AI and generative AI, which are deep learning and machine learning, which is, all of us have been using machine learning for decades, not realizing it in some way, shape, or form. Deep learning is what is ChatGPT that's been around for the last couple of years. Know what it is and isn't. Understand the role of training data, meaning what goes in the training data really makes a difference in the quality of what comes out, but also the capabilities and limitations. And this is why our framework we call it AI literacy you can see. So it's the ability to use the foundation knowledge and those mindsets to be able to use AI in 3 ways: safely, ethically, and effectively. And for safety, I don't have to tell you, but there are all kinds of ways to be unsafe. For personal unsafety, or your lack of safety or those around you. Ethically is what we're talking about a lot with academic integrity or copyright or climate. But effectively is there because if you don't know how to use the tools effectively, you do not understand what this moment in time means. If there is research that shows if you use generative AI as a user that is very novice and don't know what you're doing, it does not matter how good the model is underneath it, you get the same level of content out. That the user is the moment here that's even more important than the model quality.
I have a follow-up question about,
Sure.
because I agree with everything you said, and I feel like we have been saying these same things as well. And yet, even though we know you have to be so careful, you have to give it all this context, you have to do iterative prompting back and forth. It's not one and done. All those things you just said, and yet, constantly professors will meet with us and say, what do we do? Everybody's
Right.
using it and their answers are better than they were. Their answers are better than they were, but they're clearly generated answers.
Right.
So it's like, on the one hand, the technology isn't up to snuff, and eventually people will get AI literacy and they'll learn how to
Right.
use it. And then what? I feel like there's going to be like almost a second revolution coming for when people finally get on board with prompt engineering best practices.
Well, I think that what is going to happen is that those that have a flexibility and agility around this, whether that's prompting for the next couple of years, because like it's really interesting. Like people are like, oh, you don't need to prompt reasoning models. Yes, you do. You just have to prompt them differently. You have to flood it with context and format, just in a different way. You don't have to do it you don't have to do it in the same kind of like chain of thought way because it's doing that in the background. But then also the ability to like start to recognize and evaluate outputs. Because what I would say, Kim, is like those kids that are getting better answers are getting better answers because they're using their notes, their ingenuity, their creativity to get something better. Because I would bet you there's a lot of trash too that either gets the kids realize pretty quickly they don't want to submit or they get caught doing. And so I think that, one of the things that we're going to have to evaluate is that what happens when we've been saying the easy button exists for everything. Literally every written, video, creative project you could ever want, there will be an easy or easier button, right? So not all of it will be totally easy. But I do think that we're going to have to start changing our perceptions of what is truly uniquely human, where our originality, our ability to, really take in cognitive dissonance and like understanding two separate things or evaluate multiple points of view, understand what people really want and what we want, like all of that is going to be so important. But if we think that schools can exist, and I'm saying higher education and K-12, or even boot camps and vocational training, is going to be able to exist in the way it's persisted for 100+ years, it's not the case. It's just not. And as soon as you build AI literacy in an organization and you build in responsible guidelines, you immediately start seeing how the structures that are around that institution start to fall apart. And so for us, like, I think that's why it's so, so important for us to have these bigger conversations, because while we are committed to AI literacy, it's not really why we exist. And we exist because we believe that education is necessary for us to adapt, transform, change for the better, but it also has to. Like that, this is the forcing mechanism. This is the lever. This is the wall that is coming, and we are not going to be able to breach it without really, like, we're going to have to essentially take it apart and rebuild it. And it probably won't be a wall anymore, honestly, because we wouldn't be able to build the bricks fast enough to have the next set. Like, it's going to have to be something that's truly agile, which is not what we are good at as like education institutions. We are very inflexible for all kinds of reasons, some great and some terrible, and some in the middle. But this is that forcing mechanism where that agility is going to be so important.
Well, it's concerning because, I mean, we were all taken by surprise with the implications of, social media and the algorithms that just give us more of what we want or we don't want, but we don't realize it. And we see the negative consequences associated with low digital literacy, which to me, I can't unsee it now. Like I already knew it existed, but now that we're in this space and we're teaching, to me,
Right.
big AI literacy, and then we realize how low just digital literacy is among adults, so much less, children.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me, and not to go I don't want to take this conversation down like a doomsday direction, but that's when I get really concerned as I see how often adults struggle with identifying misinformation. And what does that mean now for a world where anyone at the click of a button can create something that looks very authoritative and real and truthful? And that's concerning.
Yeah, I think that, critical, we in the last 20 years, we've had this very interesting mix of standards-based teaching and high-stakes assessment, the proliferation of the internet devices and access to like both, information, through the internet, on the cloud, et cetera. That's all happened at the same time, right? And so and increased globalization. And so what we have though is I think that all of the things have compounded into where our schools and our higher education institutions have been really kind of focused on like, these are things you need to know. These are the skills. These are the things that we need to know, especially K-12. That has left less time for the work of it, right? The social emotional, the lifelong learning, the critical thinking. And I don't want to say that we ever nailed it, because if you think about the industrial model, that's never been the case. But I do think there was like more of a recognition that was important, but there were new structures that came in place and new moments that like forced that down. Like, where it really, even though we recognized it through learning science and just knowing that like your classroom, if you're a higher education institution and you're a faculty member, if you just do your sit and release content where you just had the same deck that you've had for 20 years, and or if you're like coming together and like having conversations and like there's like meaningful like opportunity for learning and novel application, you know the difference in the engagement in that room, right? And so I think that has made it where we are in this moment where critical thinking skills and critical evaluation may be the lowest it's been in a while, partially because anybody can put something on the internet that could be completely untrue. And in fact, not only can it be completely untrue, it can be made in a way that it actually is picked up by algorithms and social media and Google search to proliferate the nonsense. And there's research that shows that it's very hard for people when it looks really nice. There's an image and text. Your mind says, your reptile mind, I mean, like our evolutionary mind says, that's real. And so what we're asking people to do in all this moment in time is really hard. It's really, really hard. And it's only going to get harder. And that's why I think that forcing mechanism of like those traditional systems, like, do schools become a place of the lifelong learning, the durable skills, the soft skills? Like, does that really become what middle and high school and even potentially vocational work, well, that's less vocational, but like liberal arts degrees become more and more? Because the way we're doing it right now is not putting us in a good position to be able to respond to generative AI, being able to do anything that a human can do, at least at some fidelity right now.
Yeah, like the incentives are not there for true learning. They haven't been there. I mean, we are in late stage capitalism where we already have this huge wealth gap that's only getting worse. And then you just think about what the incentives have always been. And the incentives have not been around learning. It's always been like, get the job that's going to give you the most money, regardless of whatever it takes. Not to actually learn to think critically, truly problem solve, evidence-based reasoning. And like we're living the results of that. And so but sometimes it just feels, I don't know, I say all the time to my partner who has two young children, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I see the struggles and the challenges and what's happening with them. And I'm just like, thank God I'm not teaching in a K through 12 space. Like to then combine that with childhood development, and like I can't imagine. I don't envy those positions because it's incredibly challenging. It's hard enough working with, experts at the PhD level. Yeah, that there's just a reckoning that's happening, and it's
But I think that like the passion, I mean, people that go into teaching, especially like K-8, are going into teaching for the love of kids and love of teaching.
yes.
And so I think that is the real thing. And I think K through 12 too. Someone recently said to me that like, and I don't believe this is true, that high school teachers going for the love of the content. I think some do, where they're like, I really want to teach math, or I really want to teach English. I don't think those people last. as long, or they only last in certain areas. So I do want to kind of say that I don't think that's right. I think that like, you know, teaching in K-12 is the thing that people do, right? And so I think that to your point, Jess, is that like, yes, it's hard, but it's always been hard. And now I think there are things that are making it a lot harder. And I think it probably is one of the hardest times ever, if not the hardest time to be an educator. But I can't tell you how amazing. You know what? When I was in Australia running, like Pivot for the first time, when we came back, there's so much rhetoric about teachers not caring or being overwhelmed or all this stuff. We have not met a teacher this whole time that has not been willing to, when we find out our approach, maybe don't believe it when we walk in, but in the first 30 minutes, is not open to learning. Like, how amazing is that? And this is 100,000 educators, whether in their trainings or online or webinars or in our cohorts. And that to me is such an indication that we have a chance, that we can nail this and we do it the right way, because I just cannot tell you just how amazed and honored and privileged we are to get to do this work right now, because of who we get to support.
Yeah. No, I think teachers are a special breed. I meant more so the incentives, like for the average student, who's not looking like incentives, like when you go to college, like the incentives have definitely
Right.
shifted away from liberal arts to like, what career am I going to get to make the most money? And how do I get there as fast as possible? Part of that is like, we have this crazy debt burden in higher ed, but
Yes.
and then I think about where you're located, like in North Carolina. We're one of the states we pay teachers the least in the K through 12 space. And one of the results of that was we have a huge teacher shortage. His son couldn't start kindergarten on time because they didn't have a teacher for him. And this is in like a really nice county in the state. And so, yes, for those teachers, I'm like, I can't imagine asking them to do one more thing. I'm sure they would do it. But yes, you don't go into teaching, at least it's not about making money. It's for the love of kids and teaching and learning. It's more about like the bigger incentives in place in our society that drive kids more and more toward these different types of careers that, anyways, I don't want to go off track with that. Kimberly, do you want to ask a question? I feel like I've been asking the last couple follow-ups.
No, just listening. It's just fascinating. Yeah. Well, I was going to kind of shift us to talk about trends or maybe some innovations that I just got back from ASU GSV.
Yes.
And so,
In the AI show. Yeah.
yeah, in the AI show, what do you think will be the big movers of learning or education in the coming years?
I think that I think that most of the thought leaders in the room, when they saw the AI show, which is really where a lot of these AI and education ed tech tools were exhibiting, didn't really see a significant change from last year. It's primarily chatbots and lesson planning tools, instructional design. I say in higher ed, there's more kind of like administrative stuff too, of like some of the career advising and those types of things. I think that we are stuck in this moment where we don't have a vision for what's truly possible. And that I think in part might be due to like a lack of real like deep technical knowledge of what's happening. And I think that's everything. I would bet that if I went to like close it, like with the learning development, or if I went to a higher ed one, or I went to even like a corporate one, like marketing, that there's a lot of like maybes, but not a lot of like real things to latch onto, which makes sense. Very early stage. And I think that we're kind of caught in this, like this, I used to say the tip of the nose, we're like right here in terms of how far we can see. And so I think that for me, like it's clear, and I'm going to be working with some colleagues and thought leaders on kind of a vision of like the moments in time of when the generative AI systems can do things that will radically change our relationship to education. And so, because I think that's going to be necessary, I think that it's clear that some districts are really pushing forward. A lot of them are ones we work with. A lot of higher education institutions are trying. So like Northwestern is partnered with Claude Anthropic. You've got Cal State and ASU with OpenAI. And so I think that that's going to be quite interesting. I think, though, there's a lot of people talking about talking, meaning like there's a lot of like just talking, and very little of it is truly like entrenched and practical. And so that's what we always try to bring because, I can tell you like what people get wrong, what they liked. I can tell you what every room looks like because I'm in those rooms, right? So I think that that is something that's quite hard right now. I think that the control here, we talked about locus control earlier, is really down to those that are creating foundation chatbots. These foundation models that are underlying these chatbots, like OpenAI, Google, Meta, Baidu in China, you've got Mistral in France, you've got Google. They're in a race to build superintelligence. They will not stop. If everyone listening, stopped using generative AI right now, while you still can, because it's going to be in every device soon, I don't think it would change this race now that it seems possible to build superintelligence. And so we're all along for the ride. If GTP comes out and ChatGPT says, like, we have a K-12 department, and it's going to be an essay button, and it's going to write a kid's essay, like, that's what we're going to have to deal with. And so, and I think that that's where it gets a bit tricky, that like you can have all these conversations about education, but unless you're having them with those model makers in the room where we really start to understand now that they have identified that education is like number one use is coding, number two use is homework and essays and like, schoolwork. And so they're not going to let go now. They see that this is a moneymaker for them on their path to superintelligence. And so we have to buckle up and be ready to respond as these tools start to become really focused on getting people eyeballs and to pay. And that means your 13-year-old, your 18-year-old, your 24-year-old, your graduate student. And we keep telling people, like, so ChatGPT, OpenAI release that you can, if you're at college, if you're watching this, I don't know when it'll come out, but if this is before the end of May 2025, you can get 2 months free of ChatGPT Plus if you're a college student in the US and Canada. The reason they are doing that is they want you to keep paying for next year. They want you to love it so much that you're a customer. They're not doing it for the good of exams and finals. And so this is something to consider, is that like all of these things right now, AGI is the goal, but they want to get your money. This is the biggest loss maker for technology companies of all time. The amount of losses happening. So they're just going to try to suck up as much minds, bodies, dollars on this path to when someone nails superintelligence first, if it's possible.
Yeah, back to incentives. Like there's a reason there. They're not doing that out of the goodness of their heart, Yeah.
Not to doom everybody, but it's important to recognize that like we have agency, but the agency we have right now is AI literacy. It is asking good questions, it is pushing back on certain things. It's, it is working with your young people. It's working with your opportunity to build AI literacy, because the more AI literacy you have, the better questions you can ask and the more informed decisions you can make. And that's really our opportunity right now.
I get sort of disheartened because I see some really smart, critical, articulate people doing this AI resistance thing, the hashtag AI resistance, and I'm following them every time I can because they make really good arguments, and I want to know what they're thinking and what they're saying. because I think they're getting some things right. Do you, I guess, do you get that when you do your training, or are those people kind of filtered out by the time they get into like a room that would be kind of your training?
Well, it's actually pretty interesting because a lot of people, it's mandatory when we're doing it. I think that the way we approach it from a sense of balance and how we talk about ethics and all the way through anything that we do, and because we're focused on AI literacy, that even if you don't want to use this tool, you do need to understand what it is and isn't. Because it also means, like, I would say that some of the people that are very resistant also don't really know what's happening. Like this climate impact thing, it's absolutely real, but it is at the training level, meaning that it has nothing to do with the individual user. And so it does, but some people are like, oh, because at the very beginning it did, right? The costs were 300% higher. So 300% more of your time, of your impact when you hit make me an image. So that doesn't mean it wasn't true, but it's less true now in terms of where most of the climate impact is going to be. Then I think that for us, well, like I said, we kind of have never had a hard room. We've had like one or two people that like want to fight me specifically on, we have a myth and fact about AI can think like humans. And I'm going to say it again, guys. It's not thinking. It is a probabilistic model. Today, ChatGPT had to go search the web to count the E's in Tennessee. It literally had to search the web because it doesn't know how to do that. So I thought that was hysterical because your 5-year-old could probably figure out, if you showed him what an E was, which of them, how many of them are. So I do think though that like it is this moment of like, how do we balance the resistance and the optimism into a more pragmatic place? And I think it's quite funny because people believe AI for education, it sounds very positive because it was the only URL I could find when I launched the website almost 2 years ago. This is true. That's why it's also a .io. It was not a informed choice that I made. There's a competitor that's very similarly named too. So good job me. But what's interesting though is that like we tend to fall right in the middle. We're gonna speak truth to either side when we can. But I do think that the resistance, if you can couch it, if you are resistant, couch it in a way that people can hear. Because the loudest voice on either side is saying, get on the bus or get run over. It's here, embrace, embrace, embrace. Or it is the worst thing that ever happened, ban, 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 are only talking to those people that agree with them. So if you're on one of those camps, we actually talk about how our trainings are meant to bring both people. Like your AI optimists need to come back a bit because they're maybe using these tools in ways that can be harmful. They're maybe using chatbots with second graders, and because they think it's the future. But I think that that is what we want. So I would just say that for us, like both sides are incredibly, this is a time for subtlety and nuance.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, not a great time for subtlety and nuance in our climate, but it is. And like, that's where the power can come, because if you're resistant, you say, I also see the value in these things. But for me, like, until there's more of a commitment of X or whatever, I'm going to keep building my AI literacy of those around me and give them accessibility, whatever. But these are things that I will never do. I do not espouse them, and I'm going to choose not to. And so, but I'm doing it from an informed place. I think that is what I think sometimes that happens, Kim, online. But sometimes it's just like anything around this is just they're like, people are like, I'm sure there are people out there that think I'm a terrible human because they either think that I'm not optimistic enough or they think that I'm too pessimistic. And that's okay because everybody, I don't know how this happened, but like I'm now a LinkedIn influencer, which is by far the nerdiest thing that I've ever had happen to me. So I'm putting myself in the middle of this, right? But I do think it's a good sign though, if you're thinking about it, that people on both sides are upset with me. And I think that that's all I would say for that kind of idea of hashtag resistance or hashtag, get on the bus.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
I'm
true.
really concerned about the nuance because it does require like just an attention to detail that we don't have an attention span for.
Right.
Yeah, we don't.
Well, we're coming. I have to say, guys, I do have to go soon because we're doing like, I have to find an apartment. So if anybody has ever tried to find apartments in New York City, that also business travels, then you know. But I know that there's like, I've had such a good time, but I think there's a fun wrap up question too.
Yes.
Yeah, peach and pit. Do you want to kick that off, Kimberly? Sorry, my dog is.
Yeah. We end the show with our pits and our peaches. And obviously a pit is a low point can be a low point in your day, week, month, year. It can be professional, it can be personal. Peach is like something that gave you energy or was optimistic.
I am from Georgia, and one of my best friends still calls me Peaches. So I think, what's my pit? Buying an apartment in New York is my pit. It's also was warm when I left New York, and now it is cold. So don't love that part. So that's probably my pit. My peach is, how cool do we get to do this every day? I think like AI show is great. We did a Family Feud where I was a co-host. Everything went wrong, literally everything. And yet we were able, I feel like I've been training for this for 18 months because I have been training in schools and higher education institutions that already have AV and bandwidth issues. And then I'm training on generative AI models, which are the worst they've ever going to be. And so I think I've been training for the moment in front of 300 people where I would be hosting a game show where none of the technology worked at all. In fact, some of the questions were wrong. I've said survey says the first time, nothing came up at all. And so that's not my pit, though it was funny. And I think that like, we were very surprised everyone liked it so much. But my peaches is that the audience, because they're tech people in schools, were like, yeah, this happens. And the fact that they didn't give up, they kept going, they made it funny. They were like super, it was almost like they were more into it that we like were able to do that moment. And so to have that much engagement and trust and like openness to this chaos that we are living in, and you talk about the optimism that, we have and we want to continue to have, like, that's just, there's never been a time in the world where we're all going to have to learn the same things every day together. And this is that moment. And I think that what we've seen in our mission and our view is that it's possible. And I don't know if it's ever been possible before because of everything. So that's my peach, is that I do think that we have this real opportunity to make things better going forward.
Going back.
I'll just chime in, and my peach is similar in the sense that I really appreciate how interdisciplinary this space is, and I love learning, and I just feel like I've met so many incredible people ever since I became curious about generative AI. And I don't take that for granted, being able to have these types of conversations and meet new people through, whichever venues. In terms of my pits, if someone listening to this has listened since our first episode, you'll know that I am plagued by plumbing issues in my house. I am once again having a plumbing problem, and I just spent a small fortune last month, and now there's a new issue that
gosh.
I'm like,
that sucks. I lived in Australia for 3 years. I had 5 floods in my apartment. The last one ruined maybe 40% of my clothes.
Oh,
and remember, I moved to Australia, so I only had 3 bags of clothes when I moved. So so I feel your pain just a lot.
yeah. I'm like, at what point do I just sell this house? I don't know. I'm not.
Think it's someone else's problem. Be like, do you rate water in weird places? Do you like toilets that don't work? If so, I've got the property for you.
Yes. No matter what I do, never fixed. Ugh.
I don't have any pits. I'm fine. Everything's fine.
No one believes you, Kim, but we love you even more that you have so many pets right now that you're like, can't pick one. Do you have a peach? It's the weekend?
I do. I got a paper out for publication yesterday.
Yay.
That was a revise and resubmit, so I'm pretty sure it'll get through the process, and that felt really good. And this is a big deal for me. I didn't wordsmith it to the death. That minimum, somebody told me this week, minimum viable product. All you gotta do is a minimum viable product. And I did, and it was like, oh, why didn't I do that a decade ago?
You know what? We're never too old to learn.
True.
And I think that sometimes our learning comes because we have only this much time left. And so you really have to like decide what's important to you. And like, I think like my climate pivot when everything went wrong, including having floods and COVID and like craziness, is that like it showed me who I was. Like, and who I was not, who I was someone that cared about people, and that always been the case. But it became so clear when I had to make these moments or like where I really legitimately was working like sometimes 20-hour days, like that was what left. That was what was left, right? That was what was left. And I think that like things that you're pulling apart right now, Kim, are the things that maybe never did you justice, right? And now that you've seen it, that it's okay, you can have that comfort level and move past it. And I think that is, while it's complicated, it can be a really good thing. But just, yeah, I hope this was good for you guys. And those who are listening, I hope you had a good time too.
Yes.
No, this was lovely. Thank you so much.
You.
Yeah. And good luck with your apartment hunt.
Thank you. Hopefully by the time you're listening, I am not living in like in a box in Central Park. So
with
really
your
wish me luck.
leftover Australian clothes.
Wild. Thank you guys.
Bye.